Most people think they know their bodies pretty well. They think they know their cars too, but we readily admit that when it comes to the actual details, we're often pretty clueless. Unless we have recently changed one, many of us don't know what size our tires are, and we're okay with that. When it comes to ourselves, though, we like to pretend we know everything. Let's take a look at some of those details people often think they know and explain how tiny choices work together to become the you actually are. The first thing we should tackle when talking about the body is to explain exactly what we mean when we say metabolism. You've probably heard the number 2,000 calories for a day's intake before, particularly on the sides of cereal boxes and other nutritional labels. But where did that 2,000 calories come from? In 1990, the FDA took a survey and asked people how many calories they ate and published the average as a baseline. It's helpful to translate that 2,000 calories into an example. 2,000 calories is roughly the amount of calories needed by a 5'9 man who weighs 200 pounds and is in a coma at the correct room temperature to avoid losing any weight. That's called his basal metabolic rate, which is the minimum amount of calories needed to simply sustain muscle mass and bodily functions with no additional energy exerted. We can calculate an estimated basal metabolic rate, or BMR, for anyone using an equation using height, weight, and age. These are just estimates, and physical fitness and gender does play a part. It's often easier for us to use an online calculator like the one linked in the lesson to determine our BMR. After we know our coma energy level, research done clear back in 1918 gives us a way to estimate what our energy needs are in order to maintain a lifestyle we want to maintain. We take our BMR and multiply it by factors determined by J. Arthur Harris and Francis G. Benedict, called the Harris-Benedict equation. It says, simply being awake a normal amount of time and occasionally moving from the bed to the couch multiplies your BMR by 1.2. So our 5'9", 200-pound man needs 2,400 calories to wake up and watch TV all day without eventually wearing down or losing weight. A slow walk a couple times a week increases his BMR up to 1.37 times, or up to 2,750 calories. That's a daily increase, not simply the results of his exercise plus his BMR. When activity takes place, besides the simple exertion of whatever actions are being taken, fluids and minerals are being moved all over the body. Harris and Benedict measured the additional heat created by the body's rebalancing those fluids and minerals, which includes things like the kidneys and liver filtering blood, sugars and proteins being moved in and out of cells, and water being balanced across the body. And they determined that the effects of exercise on our metabolism are slow cycles that play out over several days. The older you get, the more obvious of a statement this is to many adults. To understand the Harris-Benedict equation, it's important to realize two things that have been repeatedly confirmed in peer-reviewed studies. The first is that when we use the term exercise, we really mean activities that raise your heart rate to at least 70% of your maximum normal heart rate, and keep it there for only about 10 to 15 minutes. For most people, a brisk walk will accomplish sufficient exercise to move them into the moderately active range, even though they may still think of themselves as sedentary and calculate their calories far too conservatively. The second thing to notice is that the benefits of exercise fall off somewhat rapidly. Moderate walking will get you to almost as much daily benefit as daily weightlifting, at least in terms of adjusting metabolic rate. Knowing this, we can now figure out how many calories we need to meet our current lifestyle. We figure out our BMR from an online calculator and then estimate how active our life is. If a 5'9", 200-pound man wants to be able to walk briskly for 10 minutes every day and do an hour or two of yard work every weekend, even if he sits in the office all day, he can consider himself moderately active, and he needs around 3,000 calories per day in order to maintain his weight and activity level. What happens if he doesn't? he'll eventually lose weight. Our society likes to think that's a simple phrase, as if it describes what's going on in the body. It's far too simplistic of a description of what's really happening. Let's take a quick look at the cycles that control what really does happen. In Western culture, we like to think of the body expending energy in a few specific ways: the energy to move and the energy to digest. However, as we've already mentioned, the BMR is a fairly large part of your energy consumption. Most of what expends energy in the body is the movement of molecules in and out of the cells. The active expenditure of energy to balance a cell to perform its basic functions burns a substantial amount of energy each day. When you run out of energy, it's easy to think of only losing the ability to run and jump, but it's the normal functions within a cell that become lost eventually. The body has many mechanisms that will kick into action to respond to this loss of energy. What happens next in the body depends on what fuel the body has been able to digest recently. You have no doubt heard about the 3 macronutrients: protein, carbohydrates, and fats. In a given day, to heal and reproduce cells, the body needs a relatively small amount of amino acids to repair any damage done to the body, and basic bodily repair and upkeep. It also needs a lot of water and electrolytes to replace fluids lost during exercise and respiration, as well as for digestion and to flush waste products out of the kidneys. In order to heal cells, you need to have at least the necessary amino acids and the necessary calories available. We can loosely think of our blood sugar levels as a measure of readily available calories, and the body works to maintain that level. A simplified version of how to think of this is our cells have calories stored within them, or they can suck in calories from the blood, while our pancreas works to ensure that the calorie level in the blood stays at the same level. When the blood level of sugar is too high, the resulting higher insulin level tells the body to store calories from the blood. It doesn't tell your body to get fat, it tells all the cells to absorb sugar and protein. And if your cells aren't hungry, the fat cells are where the sugar gets absorbed and converted to fat. When the blood sugar is too low, it tells the liver to release stored sugar. For example, vigorous weightlifting may only burn 250 calories in a large man in a half hour. That's only a Snickers bar worth of energy. It's the process of replacing those calories in cells and rebuilding any damaged muscle that causes your overall metabolism to rise, according to the modifiers in the Harris-Benedict equation. In response to exercise, the body undergoes an adaptation process in many ways, from increasing muscle mass to expanding blood vessels and creating more capillaries. The body must rebalance fluids, redistribute nutrients, and digest increased nutrients. All of these things factor into the increased metabolic rate in response to exercise, besides the physical demands of the activity. Remember, everything that's happening in the body is the result of a chemical reaction that's happening right at that moment. The body has a very limited ability to store protein, and it must break down muscular tissue or circulating proteins to produce the amino acids necessary to repair or create other tissue. In order to build or maintain muscle, you must always consume enough protein at regular intervals to continue this energy expenditure. That implies the nutrition necessary for body composition change can be generalized into A, eating enough calories to fuel the desired lifestyle, as calculated by BMR in the Harris-Benedict equation, and B, eating enough protein, regularly enough, which can be estimated using the charts in the lesson.